welcome everyone. This is just a wonderful turnout. So today's April 2nd, 2020. And this week's Bloominar is on gut health, the food-feeling connection. And our guest presenter is Erin Kenney. Erin is a registered dietitian. She's based in Boston and she specializes in gut health. Her practice is called Nutrition Rewired, and you can follow her on Instagram and Facebook, right, Erin?
Yeah.
Yeah. And she also has a wonderful book that she wrote as part of her own journey in developing a more self-loving, more loving relationship with food. And you can find that book on her website. And I also sent it in a link to all the people that registered. So if you registered after I sent that, we'll send it out tomorrow again. But it's a wonderful book. Yeah, so this Bloominar series was a co-creation, or is a co-creation, by Madonna Murphy and I. It's sort of bloomed in a process that we've been co-creating as part of a greater program that we're going to be launching May 1st called Bloom a Life You Love. So we're really excited about that. So I'm Maria Milano. I'm a wellness practitioner based in Boston. I'm a psychotherapist, coach, and a psychodramatist. And Madonna is?
I am actually a recovering corporate finance accountant, believe it or not. And, but, you know, really wanting to move into a more spirit-led, artistic life. That's why I left my job last year. So that's what I've been doing, and now working more with Maria. So I'm very excited to be here.
Yes, and Madonna is a gifted artist.
Thank you.
So the Bloominar series is devoted to true nourishment for the body, mind, and soul. And we're so excited to have Erin here tonight to talk about gut health and the food-feeling connection. So before we get started, I just wanted to do a little legal FYI. And everybody saw this or should have seen this when they registered, but this online event will be recorded using audio and video via Zoom. And it may be shared at a later time. So please know that by attending this event, you agree to any of your statements or questions or your physical likeness, so your appearance, being recorded. So you can not have your, yourself on video. You can just have your name there, whatever you want to do to manage that, but just be aware of that. And then Madonna, do you want to do a couple more housekeeping things?
Yep, sure. So just to let everybody know that throughout the meeting, I'll just have everybody on mute for now, and there'll be an opportunity later at the end. I'll probably unmute you all if we've got questions. Also, during the meeting, if you have any particular questions, you can raise your hand. There's an actual function within Zoom if you're familiar with it. If not, you basically go down into sort of the participants section at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you click around there, or there may be another option called More, depending on what device you have, there's an option to raise your hand. And I can see that you have your hand raised. So we'll keep a note of that, and we'll give you an opportunity to ask a question during the call. Also, just finally, in the chat box feature, there is a function there to post messages to everyone. So just make sure you have everyone selected rather than to Maria Milano as the host, because we want everybody to see your message. That way everybody can help and share in your journey throughout the meeting. Okay? And if you have any other questions technical wise, just by all means put it in the chat and I'll be happy to help you. Okay? Thanks very much.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, great. So we're going to go ahead and get started with a meditation. So just want to invite everyone to take a deep breath deep down into the gut, into the belly. And close your eyes if that feels comfortable, but it's okay to leave them open as well. Just a nice, deep belly breath. And fully exhale. And another deep belly breath. And fully exhale. We're just coming into the space together, a space that we're co-creating. And then begin to imagine your breath on your next inhalation going all the way down your body into your feet. And as you exhale, imagine the energy going even more deeply down into the earth, like roots in the earth. So you're inhaling deeply, and then you're exhaling and allowing those roots to expand. Like roots of a tree. And then let those roots, as they move down into the earth, let those roots begin to grow and expand and intertwine with all of the other participants on this call. And let's just imagine creating a container of roots that will hold the container of this space that we're creating to learn about gut health. And then tune in more deeply to the gut, to intuition. And begin to listen to the gut. And right now, more than ever, given everything that we're all going through at this extraordinary time, we need our guts more than any time I can remember in my lifetime. What we're going through is just unprecedented. And we need to be able to listen to our gut and follow our intuition. So tune into that, tune into your gut, and just feel and listen for a message that your gut has for you at this time. Maybe guidance from your gut, from intuition at this time. And just listen and be open to whatever comes. And you may have a question for your gut. And if so, ask it and see if there's an answer. Beautiful. Good. And then at your own pace and your own time, go ahead and just come out back into the space, open your eyes, and go ahead, and if you feel comfortable, you can write in the chat box whatever message may have come, or maybe whatever question you might have heard or felt for your gut. Go ahead and write that in the chat box, or you can just write it down for yourself. If you feel comfortable sharing it with the group, that would be wonderful, but you don't, no pressure.
That pizza.
Yeah, so just kind of feel into that, and we'll just take a minute to give people a chance to share if you feel comfortable doing that. Yeah, and then maybe while people are kind of feeling into that, we can transition to Kate Boyd. Okay, so welcome, Kate.
Hi.
So Kate, hi. So welcome. So Kate is going to share some wisdom morsels with us. So I asked her to tune into the theme and just kind of see what she felt called to share. So.
Well, I'm really honored to be here and back with you all. There was many reasons to not be here. Good, some bad, some, all kinds of energy trying to distract me from unifying with this group. And I pushed through all of that, and I'm here because of a gut intention. There's something really magical about this interaction, and it's building. I see that we have Erin this week and Melissa's backing up, and it's just going to roll. It's just going to get bigger and bigger, the energy that we're offering, I think. And I wanted to be part of it. So thank you for showing up. And I'm thanking myself for showing up too, because there's a lot of things going on, obviously, in the universe, trying to distract this. because it's so important. The more important it is, I find, the more comes at me to derail my intention. So here we are. Yay to everybody. I wanted to share some perspectives about the gut, focus on the gut as a second brain, or even more important than the rational brain, the head brain. The new research, where the hormones and transmitters are manufactured and distributed, is really in the gut. And that's new information for me and many people. Other people emphasize, I've been reading books about the heart as the true brain, where the soul resides, and that's also true. But the internal, often irrational, sixth sense that we talked about last week with one of my heroes, Ashley Montague, of blind knowing, something that we know. We don't know how or why, but it keeps bubbling up. And it's a natural ability that moves, I find, if I trust it, it moves me toward love and light, and away from fear. And that's known as intuition in my, so far, 58-year-old vocabulary. Gut feeling, gut response, gut reaction, gut instinct. Those are all terms that probably our mothers and grandmothers have taught us, and that's not a mistake. And all of my mothers and grandmothers, biological and otherwise, have taught me to rely on my own. Everyone has it, both sexes have it, and I believe what I've been studying is that everyone needs to rely more on that, especially now, as a wisdom to stay healthy in all of our areas of health, not just body, but mind and spirit. The ability that Ashley Montague phrased was listening in the dark for intuition, which I really love that. I really love that. I do a lot of prayer and meditation in the dark, in the middle of the night, because I'm so distractible that I think I drink a lot of tea before I go to bed, so that when I wake up, I can either go out in the moonshine or be awake for a period and just see what comes up when the rest of the world seems to be asleep, which of course it is not. In terms of food, intuition, I had made a few notes. So if I look away, I'm just looking at them. I wanted to remind everyone that the first supreme comfort following the physical and psychic stress of entering the world comes in the form of warm food and feminine embrace. And I think that obviously it emanates from that moment of separation, and then again the feminine embrace results in the word comfort food, which we all are very aware of, and it's true. It's just a fact of the body memory. It's an intuitively perfect description of warming foods that we associate with feeling secure, held, safe, and I added safe enough to sleep. Just added it, and I scribbled it out, and then I added it again. So for whoever hears it, safe enough to sleep is something I'm trying to get to. In the hospital, recently I was in the hospital, I learned to slow down and take time well before meals by myself to ask myself how my body, mind, and spirit was feeling about eating, and what I might like to eat next, if anything. I asked for what I wanted and didn't eat things I didn't enjoy. And I didn't eat with people I didn't enjoy either. I couldn't hear my hunger when I ate with other people. And so I kept scaling back how to eat by being alone, to hear that small voice of my hunger. I tried to dismantle the toxic labeling system on all foods, whether they're good or bad, and I just tried to take that whole judgment out and invite all food choices to my table. The most profound practical exercise for me to slow down was to use my left hand, or even better, when I started to eat with my fingers. I called Maria from the hospital and we talked about that. I'm a touch hunger person, and so eating with my fingers took my mind out of this, and my fork as a weapon, as just an efficient shoveling tool. I started to eat with my fork in my left hand, but I consciously just switched it over all the time. So I ended up with no utensils because it was my only, I'm just such a ritual, I'm a shoveler. So in order to slow down, I had to start over when I was 2 years old and just use my hands, my left hand when I could. And that really, I think, went underneath my rational radar. And I went back to being a child, and it was much easier to just not bother to eat food I don't like, with all the emotions around those issues. I
Beautiful.
stacked my room with crayons and paper and snacks so I wouldn't be afraid of deprivation at night in the dark. I tried to listen and draw my feelings instead of eating all of my feelings all of the time. But most important thing I learned from Maria is I'm probably doing exactly what I need to do for myself at the time. And so there's no judgment, there's forgiveness, and that gives me shivers from head to foot because I can't hear that enough. If I had a recording in my house, it would be, there's just no judgment. There can't be, or I can't move anywhere out of these old habits. Now I welcome and ask whatever it is I eat. Huge statement, whatever it is I eat. And I ask it to help me. And I stop or change paths as children do whenever it isn't working. So that feels right. And I just try and kind of keep following whatever path is right without judgment. And that's my intuitive eating effort for the day. Not judge myself or the food. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing. Beautiful.
It's really important.
All right, beautiful. So, Erin, should we transition into hearing your presentation on gut health? And she's got so many wonderful slides, and I forwarded her the intentions that people had sent when they registered. So Erin thoughtfully integrated those into her presentation. So.
Yeah, well, that was beautiful, Kate. Thank you so much for sharing, and thanks everybody for coming and for having me. I said to Maria before we got on that I'm totally going to nerd out right now because this is my element. I love talking about gut health, and I love the topic today and tying everything into intuition. These slides will be available for anybody that wants access to them. I did whip them up. I pulled them from an old presentation that I did. So again, I haven't really sequenced them. It's kind of really trying to sum up everything in a shorter version so that you guys have actionable steps at the end to pull away from. I am going to be, if I can find the thing, to monitoring the chat so that I can see your questions come in if anybody has questions during the presentation. But at the end, if there's something more pressing, then you can schedule a free discovery call with me. We can talk about it over the phone or shoot me an email, whatever is easiest. So, all right, are we good with the chat room and everything? How do I get the chat room?
You go to the bottom of your screen, and I think if you click on chat, it'll bring it up for you, Erin.
I don't see that.
Or a bar. There should be a
Oh,
bar.
here we go. Okay.
There's been some great sharings
Got
of
it.
gut instincts that people have put forward, which has been really great. I've documented some of those and can share them later.
Yeah, and I know this is dinner time for a lot of people, so there is no judgment if you want to eat your dinner while we're doing this. I did that last week, so.
Yeah, thanks, Erin, for saying that. I meant to say that earlier, and I totally forgot, so thank you.
All right, so I'm just going to dive right into it. So my name's Erin Kenney. I'm a registered dietitian. I have a master's degree in nutrition sciences, and I'm also a holistic cannabis practitioner, where I integrate the use of medicinal cannabis into my practice, where I work one-on-one with clients who have more rare conditions or are looking for alternative medicine, such as things with anxiety, sleep, especially gut health, which is aligning with the topic today. And as Maria mentioned, I just wrote an ebook that is an ebook, and it's a cookbook called Rewire Your Gut. You can find this on my website. It's got tons of amazing recipes and really good practical tips, some of which I'm going to cover tonight. Again, you can also do that on get that on my website. Okay, I'm going to try not to get distracted by the comments. So here we go. So this is just a little bit about me. I'm not going to dive too much into it. It's kind of some random structured bullet points that I just put together this afternoon. But I wouldn't be here today if it weren't for my story. This is really stemming from why I became passionate about gut health. It started with, from the get-go. When I was born, I was lactose intolerant. I had chronic stomach aches from ever since I can remember. I was always, a large portion of my childhood was spent on the toilet. And there's no TMI when it comes to talking to me about anything. So especially when we're talking about gut health, because our guts give us some really important feedback about what's going on in our body. So frequent ear infections, really just was never feeling great from a digestive perspective. And then tying in the fact that I grew up with a father with severe mental illness, which had its own challenges. And, that ties into this all as well. Poor dietary choices through on and off, also just being a teenager and not tapping into intuition or listening to the things that my gut didn't like or did like. I fell into the dieting train. I've done low carb, low fat, intermittent fasting, you name it. And it was, definitely, again, part of the journey. And it led me to, my food philosophy now, which I will cover on the next slide. I've struggled with anxiety and depression throughout my life, and we'll talk about how that ties into gut health and how the gut-brain axis, as Kate mentioned. I then lost my father while I was in college, and this kind of was actually something that propelled me to really move forward with my career as a dietitian. I worked with a holistic nutritionist and finally ditched conventional medicine when it comes to truly healing my gut, someone who took a really holistic approach, and deciding to prioritize my mental health, which is always going to be a work in progress, but definitely necessary and something that's integral with gut health. And here I am now, where I have dedicated my life to helping others understand the integral link between our gut and our whole body. So my food philosophy is really to keep the diet as broad as possible to improve quality of life and develop a deeper, healthier relationship with yourself. And so when it comes to gut health, it can be very complicated, because there are times where there is room for eliminating certain foods in the diet. And this is something that I have done in the past, but it has to be done very carefully, because when you remove certain foods, we then have this idea that these foods are good and these foods are bad, which can also align with things that we all know about diet culture. But also with gut health, if we have a reaction to a food, then we assume that that food is bad. But the way that I work with clients is, working on establishing a healthy relationship with food, understanding that The goal is to keep your diet as broad as possible. And if there is some sort of elimination for a period of time, it is with the goal of reintroduction. And I love this quote by Ellen Satter. She says, when the joy goes out of eating, nutrition fails. Because we can talk all day about, micronutrients, macronutrients, vitamins, minerals, but if you aren't enjoying the food that you're eating, you are missing a huge part of overall health. Okay, so the gut microbiome, this is a fun pun. I love gut puns. So we have more bacteria in our gut than human cells, which I think is pretty incredible. We have about 100 trillion bacteria, both good and bad, that live inside of our digestive system. So when I say gut microbiota, I'm referring to our gut bacteria. And our gut, a lot of people think when they think gut, they think stomach. But when I say gut, it's referring to the small and the large intestine. Okay, so I am hopefully going to convince you all by the end of this talk that bacteria is sexy. So when you see like marketing schemes out there for the latest diet or all these things, that's kind of what we as humans are drawn to. We like quick fixes. We like things that, indicate that we're going to be our best possible self in the shortest amount of time. But when it comes to gut health and really making positive change and long-term sustainable change, when we address our gut health from a root cause perspective, then we can really make truly healthy lifestyle habits. And so these are just some of the functions of our bacteria in our gut. So development and training of the immune system, which is incredibly relevant right now, especially with what's going on with COVID-19. Biosynthesis of vitamins and amino acids, also breaking down food components. I always say to my clients, you're not what you eat, you're what you absorb. So if you can't actually absorb the nutrients, the proteins, the fats that you're eating, then what good are they? So we need a healthy gut to do so. Metabolism of therapeutics. So our gut bacteria will determine how well we metabolize a drug. So for instance, if you're taking an antidepressant, if you're taking Tylenol or an antibiotic, the bacteria in your gut is going to determine how you digest, absorb, and mobilize that drug. Modifications of the nervous system. So Kate also touched on this. We have our largest storage system of serotonin is our gut. Serotonin is that hormone. It makes us feel good. There are gut bacteria that produce the neurotransmitter GABA, which is responsible for making us feel calm and reducing our anxiety. Promotion of fat storage. And a lot of people will think of this as negative, but we need fat. And so our gut bacteria is going to determine how we store that fat and making sure that we have what we need to keep our bodies safe and healthy. Modulation of bone mass density. So I have so many clients who are pumping calcium supplements and, trying to do their doctor's recommendations of, I need to get my bone health up. We often don't connect our gut bacteria to our bone health because it is very, very, very closely related. Protection against epithelial injury. So if you look at this picture on the right here, when we're talking about the epithelial, it's basically the skin, the outer layer of this gastrointestinal tract that is so important. And if this layer here is damaged in any sort of way, then we'll talk about what that can do with our health. Resistance to pathogens. So again, 70% of our immune system is located in our gut. It's incredibly, incredibly important. And then promotion of angiogenesis. So I loved Kate's connection to the heart. When we look at the research, gut health and heart health are directly connected. The bacteria in our gut are promoting angiogenesis, which is basically making new blood vessels. So it's directly related to our cardiovascular system. Hippocrates said, I think this is one of my favorite quotes of all times, all disease begins in the gut. And I love this I love it because I made it. So I think it's a nice little graph here that shows how gut health and all of these other aspects of our health are directly connected. And I had a coworker one time, he said, do you really think that gut health is the root cause of everything? And I said, absolutely not. gut health is not the root cause of everything, but gut health is directly tied to everything. So when you look at the graph, there's thyroid health, our gene expression, our mental health, all of these things are directly connected to the gut. So if you have thyroid hormones that are not adequately functioning, like T3 and T4, that's going to impact our gut motility. What does that mean? So it means that our gut has these motions, the smooth muscle is moving for constipation or diarrhea. And so if we don't have adequate thyroid hormones, we now see issues presenting in the gut. And the same goes for our gut. If we see an imbalance of bacteria in the gut, we can see these hormones not being synthesized and used properly. So that's just one example with the thyroid, but again, nutrient absorption, the sleep quality and quantity, our mental health, our hair, skin, and nails, all of these things are tied and connected to the gut. So it's not a chicken or the egg situation, it's both. They're both important and they both need to be addressed. Symptom approach. So oftentimes if you go to a doctor and you say, you know, I have pain here, they'll give you a painkiller for something. Or you say, I have constipation, they're going to tell you to take, you know, Miralax, a laxative. So these are treating symptoms. And so it's really important to note that when we get to the root cause of an issue is when we can really start to see true healing. So what are some signs of an unhealthy gut? So there are some more obvious ones like diarrhea, constipation, bloating, gas, just feeling, you know, that physical sense of discomfort in that area. But then we have mood disorders, we have food sensitivities, skin conditions. Our skin is the largest organ in our body. And when we see things like eczema, psoriasis, acne, all of those things are really important because they're good feedback that something is not going on in the gut that is healthy. Chronic fatigue, again, and a lot of these things too aren't saying, okay, you definitely have something wrong with your gut. It's just these are all things to consider when we look at them as symptoms. Chronic fatigue, having chronic fatigue can be a sign that something's going on in your gut. Unexplained weight gain, autoimmune disease. So autoimmune disease is basically your immune system overreacting. And as I just mentioned, 70% of your immune system is located in your gut. So it would only make sense that autoimmune disease and the gut are directly connected. All right, so has anybody, well, I can't see anybody. The term leaky gut, I think a lot of people might have heard this floating around either in the media or you know, there's a lot out there, but leaky gut seems to be a more common term that people are starting to hear a little bit more of, and people are wondering, do I have leaky gut? And it sounds kind of gross, just the idea of thinking about a gut being leaky. And so when we talk about what the clinical term for leaky gut is, it's intestinal hyperpermeability. And what that means is that I'm going to actually scoot forward to the the next slide, just to show you. So these cells on the left here are basically the healthy cells. So these are going to be the cells in your gut lining. And you notice how they're tightly uniform. They're in a nice row and there's no space between them. Now, when we talk about what leaky gut is, we look on the right here and we see the space between these cells in this intestinal layer where they are now, they're loose and there's room for things to pass through here. So this is what leaky gut is referring to, is we have these bacteria and these toxins that are coming from inside our gut where they are supposed to be. They're supposed to be there. Remember, it's healthy to have bacteria and toxins and things. Our body knows what to do with those. It's when they pass through these junctions and then they make their way into our bloodstream where we start to see issues. So back to this slide, large protein molecules are one of the things that are typically not supposed to be coming out of the gut and into the circulation. And this will trigger an immune response in somebody, which is when you can start to see food sensitivities and skin conditions and things showing up as a result of this leaky gut. So what are some of the things that can cause a leaky gut? Medications are a big one, like antibiotics, especially long-term use of any sort of antibiotics, especially the broad spectrum ones. High levels of stress. So this is a huge one, and I think it's a very underrated one, especially because I do work with a lot of athletes, and we don't think of exercise being a stress. We just think of it as, you know, something that we do to stay healthy. But stress is a huge, huge impact on the gut microbiome and leaky gut and, you know, inflammation in general. Any sort of toxins, bacteria, are also can play a huge role in development of this intestinal hyperpermeability. It can be healed. Your gut can heal, and that's the silver lining of all of it, is that this is not something that is, you know, typically causing long-term damage. It's things we can take care of ourselves. Now, the gut and the immune system. So we have a mutualistic relationship between our gut microbiome and our immune system. They work together and they support each other. So I've mentioned this twice already. I think 70 to 80% of the body's immune cells are found in our gut. It has its own, it's this GALT, G-A-L-T. It's a lymph tissue in our intestine that is responsible for our immune reaction. Oops, oh yeah, absolutely, Melissa. I can definitely talk about this. Melissa asked how stress is related to exercise in athletes, and when does exercise become a stressor? And it's very individualized, and it depends. One of the big things that this depends on is how properly fueled somebody is. So if you're under fueling and over exercising, remember, your gut is a tissue. So if it doesn't have the energy to support the repair of your body, which again, your gut is a tissue, then that's when we start to see gut issues. So it's not a specific amount, it's individualized to each person, and either under exercising, over fueling, or a combination of both can become a huge stressor on the gut. Great question. And then thoughts on apple cider vinegar and how to use it properly. So apple cider vinegar is a very popular supplement, and it's also just something that people will use by putting it in their water. When you are highly stressed or when you have a lot of gut issues going on, a lot of the times we see a reduced amount of stomach acid, which is, it's funny because we see nowadays the incredible high levels of proton pump inhibitors being prescribed. What are proton pump inhibitors? They are those acid reducing medications that people will take for heartburn or other medication or other symptoms that people will complain to their doctors about. So one of the things that apple cider vinegar can support is promotion of stomach acid that can help you digest and absorb if you're in a state where you don't have optimal digestion. So should you be taking shots of apple cider vinegar, every day? Probably not. If I ever recommend it to a client, I say, use it as in a salad dressing, maybe put a little small splash of it in a tea. It doesn't need to be, the extreme. And you also want to listen to your body and see what feedback you're getting. If it's something that is helping you, you should notice that. And if you're, having bouts of diarrhea after taking it, then that's a sure sign it's not doing you any good. And bone broth. So bone broth is great because when we talk about leaky gut, bone broth contains amino acids that are very soothing for the gut tissue itself. So it contains these amino acids that can help promote the regeneration and integrity of our gut cells. So that's one of the big benefits of gut health. Bone broth. I'm a big fan of Kettle and Fire has a great bone broth. They have like a ginger turmeric one. Those are really delicious. I love it. You can just make a soup with it. It's really easy to incorporate into soups. So I'm going to talk about kimchi moving forward. So don't worry, I will cover this. So this slide here, you can see the Mediterranean diet is on the right side of here. And the reason I put this up here, if you're not familiar with the Mediterranean diet, it's a diet that really promotes, fruits, vegetables, grains, and you'll see that at the top here, meat is a very small portion of the pyramid. And I also love too that they have this physical activity at the bottom. They have enjoy meals with others. Like I love this as a whole, really. And of course the wine helps too, right? So So this pyramid is great. And the reason for that is because the research has shown that a diet that is rich in fruits, vegetables, and legumes, and the smaller portions of meat, has shown to promote short chain fatty acids. Well, short chain fatty acids are basically promoting the development of a really strong immune system. So when we think of the optimal diet, and when we look at the research and what they've found, a diet that looks similar to that of a Mediterranean diet has been shown to be really positive for gut health. And gut dysbiosis, the word dysbiosis is basically referring to an imbalance of gut bacteria. So that means that we have too much bad bacteria that is overpowering the good bacteria. And that can impair our immune response, making us more susceptible to things like respiratory infections and gastrointestinal infections. So again, we're in a pandemic right now where it's respiratory infection stemming. And so it's important to say that, that's something to keep in mind when we're looking at, keeping our immune systems robust. Okay. So the gut-brain connection, this is my favorite area to talk about because it is so powerful. Our brain is so powerful, which I'm sure many of you know. But just knowing, in terms of these symptoms that we have, like bloating and gas and diarrhea and things like that, understanding on more of a chemical level what's going on here. A growing body of evidence suggests that our beneficial bacteria support positive mood and emotional well-being. Now, if you look at the structure here on the right, you can see that the brain directly impacts the gut with things like motility. So that means, if you're having diarrhea or constipation, if you've ever been really nervous or been someone who gets really, you notice your bowel movements become more frequent when you're in high levels of stress, or maybe they become less frequent. That's because the brain can actually impact that motility. Nutrient delivery. So the delivery of nutrients like, carbs, fats, proteins to your muscles, to your cells, to different parts of your body can all be impacted by your brain. And then microbial balance. So as I mentioned, the stress can be a huge cause of having a dysbiosis, having an imbalance of these bad gut bacteria. And then the arrow goes up on the right side where we're seeing that these gut microbiome also influence neurotransmitters. 90% of serotonin is stored here. GABA, another neurotransmitter, is made here. And then we have stress, anxiety, and mood, which are all tied to that. Our brain and our gut are physically linked together. There's an enteric nervous system, which is basically a physical link between our brain and our gut, as well as the vagus nerve. So we have this chemical reaction, but we also have a physical connection. So my sleep apnea doctor told me to go on a diet, Mediterranean diet, 4 years ago. Now that you're explaining things a little more, I'm understanding. Okay. Yeah. So the reason why I love the Mediterranean diet is because it's not cutting foods out. It's not the low FODMAP diet. It's not a keto diet. It's showing everything, but it's showing that a majority of the foods are coming from these fibrous, nutrient dense foods that have polyphenols and have, foods that produce short chain fatty acids when we digest them, and antioxidants. So I hope that I'm glad that hopefully cleared it up a little bit. So several studies have showed taking probiotics has been associated with reducing feelings of anxiety and improving emotional well-being. So there's a lot of really great research out there. It's a tough thing to kind of, the gut in general is a tough thing to look at when it comes to research because it's constantly changing. If you went on a very high-fat diet, within 24 to 48 hours, your gut microbiome would already be changing. So that's what makes it very difficult to research. This was interesting. So I've talked a little bit here about GABA, which is that neurotransmitter that is associated with reduced anxiety. They found a bacteria called Lactobacillus rhamnosus, which is basically that bacteria was associated with producing this neurotransmitter that makes us feel calm. So research has been able to pick out specific strains and say, oh, this type of strain has found to be low in people with depression, or this has been low with people with obesity. So they can make associations, but we really can't pinpoint one specific bacterial strain and correlate it with a condition. And yes, I will be emailing the slides. So can I speak on vegan diets? Yeah, so I mean, this was a big year for the vegans, because the Netflix documentary came out, The Game Changers, and everyone was coming into my office like all confused about what they should be doing. If you're not familiar with this documentary, it was a very biased documentary, really highlighting top level athletes who are vegan. I don't even like to call it a documentary, because a documentary tells a story. This was definitely promoting a bias, but I digress. So in terms of vegan diets, there's so much benefit to eating more plants. And is it necessary to go absolutely vegan? I don't believe so. My philosophy, again, is that all foods fit. So if it's for an ethical reason, I think that's amazing. But if someone is trying to go vegan because they want to improve their health, I would say be very careful. There's nutrient deficiencies that you have to be careful with. You need to be very vigilant with your nutrition if you're going to choose to eat that way. So I hope that kind of answered the question. I mean, there wasn't really, I guess, a question. That's just kind of my take on vegan diets, is that for an ethical reason, I think it's amazing. Just make sure that you're being very, I would say, work with a professional at least to get like a 3-day food record looked at, to make sure that you're getting everything that you need and supplementing with all the things that you need. Yes, all foods fit. I love it. And then lastly, I also want to highlight here, and I always say this to my clients who they'll ask me, should I try just going for my diet and forget the medication? I'm not a doctor, and I also believe medications are so powerful and can really benefit people. And I would never recommend someone just stopping a medication, especially for mental health reasons. But here, just highlighting that therapy and medications are a piece of the puzzle, but if we're not addressing underlying gut imbalances, then we're really not able to make true change. So again, it's a holistic approach. We have addressing it from multiple ways. And again, medications can be so supportive. So here's my takeaway for you guys of how to improve your gut health. And I'm so open to questions, because I mean, if it were up to me, I could talk about this all night. So the first thing is getting enough fiber. So when we talk about vegan, vegetarian diets, I mean, for sure, the reason why we see the reduced rates in obesity, the reduced rates in cardiovascular disease, it's because people are eating more fiber, they're eating more colors, they're eating more plants. So when I talk about vegan, I don't like to see these processed, I'm eating, veggie burgers that are made with GMO structured meats that taste and look like chicken. Those can be fine. But again, the reason why we see the benefits in research is because of all of the different colors and whole foods and fiber that these people are eating. So 25 grams for women, 35 grams for men. Get your fiber in. Try not to take a supplement of fiber. These don't work the same way that foods do. Nature intended us to be getting it from food. And then someone had asked about fermented foods. So eat fermented foods. I almost love to incorporate a fermented food or some sort of probiotic rich food in every single meal, whether it's even just like a little kimchi on the side of my plate. So kimchi, sauerkraut, kombucha, these are 3 types of non-dairy fermented foods. If you tolerate dairy, full-fat yogurt, kefir can be wonderful. Other probiotic rich foods can include yogurt, but when you look at yogurt, you want to make sure that the label says contains live active cultures. If it says made with live active cultures, that might just mean the yogurt was made with it, but during the process, those bacteria may have been destroyed. So again, contains live active cultures when you're buying a yogurt product. Get plenty of omega-3 fatty acids. I cannot stress this enough. If you don't like high-fat fish like salmon, mackerel, sardines, anchovies, which I get, like anchovies and sardines, not exactly everybody's cup of tea. but I highly recommend that you take a supplement if you're not getting enough, 2 to 3 servings a week of high fat fish to get these types of fats in, because they're going to promote beneficial gut bacteria. They're going to promote positive brain health. Your brain is made of these fats. So if you're not getting enough of these fats, you cannot possibly have positive mental health. Take a probiotic if you cannot get probiotics from whole foods. I recommend a combination of them. Supplements are not always necessary. In fact, I have clients who will take one and they just don't even see any benefit at all. So it's not necessary for everyone to do it. Give it 2 to 3 weeks and see if you find that your bowel movements, improve, if your skin starts to clear up, if your mood and your energy starts to improve. But it's really trial and error. I get a lot of questions about what type of supplement should I be taking. It's trial and error. You want to play around with different strains, start with a broad spectrum. That's a whole nother topic, is probiotic supplements. Sleep. Your gut regenerates when you sleep. It also has its own circadian rhythm. So your gut secretes hormones and it secretes digestive enzymes when the sun comes up, and it starts to slow down when the sun goes down. So remembering that your circadian rhythm, your gut has its own circadian rhythm. So working with that, getting restful sleep, develop a nice, healthy sleep hygiene routine before bed, reducing your, blue light exposure. Okay, the impact of binge eating on gut. Yeah, that's a really good question. So binge eating is definitely something that I do see with some of my clients, and oftentimes, and purging as well. Yeah, definitely. So, this is a tough one, because people that I work with can have kind of and I think this will also tie into the next slide about intuition and, that as it relates to gut health. But we see a lot of negative impacts in the gut microbiome when, purging. Definitely. You can think about even just if you were, sick and, had a stomach flu or something like that, how your gut bacteria took a little bit of time to kind of repair itself after that happens. Binge eating, just in general, of eating large amounts of food in one sitting and the stress that can put on our gut health. That's also something to consider. I love the hearts with the circadian rhythm. So is a whole food diet better in the end? Now, I think, again, I believe that all foods fit. The more whole, unprocessed foods that you can include in your diet is really important. You should never view foods as being bad or good. I always say, it's about nourishing your body, but it's also about nourishing your mind. That's really important. And then, so managing stress. Stress is huge. It is so huge. And stress doesn't mean just, I work a 9 to 5 and it's really tough on, my anxiety levels. Exercise, again, another thing we don't think of as stress. So a lot of people don't actually realize the stress load that they're under. Maybe it's, scrolling through social media. Maybe it's, a relationship. There's all of this combined, and we need to take into consideration that our gut, doesn't respond positively when we don't take care of that part of ourselves. How does something like smooth move tea affect the gut microbiome? Smooth move tea, which contains senna, which is a natural herb, which is a laxative. There's nothing wrong with taking that. I would say, again, when we talk about addressing root cause, if you're taking, I have a lot of clients come in and they're like, well, I have a daily bowel movement, but they're taking a laxative, or they're taking smooth move, or they're taking high doses of vitamin C or magnesium to get things moving, then those things you become reliant on them. Yeah, Jenna, that's a good question. So yeah, habit forming, definitely, in the sense of we're not actually treating the root cause, and then you actually start to rely on that to have a bowel movement. It's kind of like coffee. People use coffee a lot to rely on that. So getting to the root cause of why you're not having a bowel movement is important to keep in mind. Not eating enough food, especially among females. I see this all the time. Not eating enough food is a huge reason for constipation and irritable bowel syndrome, because going long periods of time without eating and then maybe eating large amounts, this would tie back into binge eating. We see the motility in our gut being very disturbed. And then thoughts on the grain-free trend. Oh, this is a good question. Yeah, and you know what? This is really individualized because I work with clients who started grain-free and they got worse. Grains can be incredibly beneficial. They contain components that can feed our gut bacteria that can help us produce those short-chain fatty acids. So I think it's very individualized. We are all so different and we all have different gut bacteria. There's no one composition of gut bacteria where we can say that's what we want. And if we knew that, then there wouldn't be 3 million probiotic supplements on the shelves. So it depends on the person. Some people do really well on a grain-free diet and it's sustainable for their lifestyle. I never like to say, oh, go cut out grains completely, but people do respond poorly to them and notice that their blood sugar, is very different. And I always use this example. I had a client who he would measure his blood sugar levels and he would measure them when he ate white rice, which traditionally we associate white rice with being a big spike in blood sugar. We think white rice is bad. It's, blood sugar goes crazy. So he measured his blood sugar when he ate white rice, and then he measured it when he ate squash. His blood sugar skyrocketed when he ate squash, and it was completely stable when he ate white rice. So it's really funny again, and this is probably tying into your gut bacteria and how they respond to these different foods. And so it's important to note that you have to also tap into this intuition and, okay, so I ate a big bowl of rice for lunch and I felt fine. So despite what people are telling me about how rice is bad and white rice is bad, I felt great after I ate it. So, really tapping in. You might eat carrots and feel like, not great. You might need more carbs in that lunch. Which grains are good? So there's no bad grains. There's no bad grains at all, really. There's the importance of having variety. So there's grains that are more nutrient dense than others. There are things that, aren't traditionally on our tables, like farro and buckwheat. And I'm trying to think of, I have one sitting out over here. So there's all these other grains that quinoa, which is technically not a grain, it's a seed or pseudo seed, if you will, but think variety with anything. Don't focus on good versus bad. Focus on how much can we incorporate different colors, different types, get creative, explore food and get curious about it in a sense of, what different flavors can you pull together. The Nordic style eating diet, again, I think it's very individualized. There's different types of diets that work for different people. Ask yourself, is this sustainable for me? Does it make me feel energized? Does it make me happy? Can I see myself doing this for the next 20 years? Then I would say it would be a good option for you if it's something that makes you feel better. Exercising, but not too much. So I mentioned this before. Again, I work with a lot of athletes and when I say athletes, I mean, you don't need to be a qualifying Olympic trial athlete to be an athlete. If you are physically active, if you walk, if you, lift some weights, if you do Pilates, if you do yoga, you're an athlete. And everybody has a different tolerance for that type of activity. And, say you're a very high stress person, adding in exercise to that can be just too much for your stress load. So, yeah, that's great. Which sensitivity to socioeconomic privilege level of impact of, okay. Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, first of all, there's not a lot of research on GMOs that would convince me to say that people need to, buy non-GMO or non-organic. I would say, focusing on the small changes like sleep and stress and, fermented foods. Those are cheap. I make my own fermented foods. You take cabbage, salt, and water, and you put it in a jar. And if you're weird like me, you put it under your bed so your roommate doesn't think you're weird, and you let it ferment for a few months. And there you go. You've got a great probiotic rich food that costs you less than $1 to incorporate into meals. So, don't focus on these trendy, turmeric supplements and this and that. It doesn't need to be fancy. We need to start with the basics, like drinking plenty of water and like variety of fruits and vegetables. Is it best to eat probiotic fermented foods in the morning or empty stomach? That's a great question. And there's no really right, there's no right answer to that. It depends on the person. I like to incorporate it into every meal as like start with one meal and see if you notice benefits. Fellow RD, welcome. Variety of fruits and vegetables can also be achieved. Yeah, so frozen, especially during this quarantine time. This is a great point, but I have clients tell me all the time, they're like, well, I eat them frozen vegetables and aren't those bad? Frozen vegetables are excellent. In fact, they're frozen at peak nutrient levels. So sometimes they're actually better than the like, very sad asparagus that you see that's been sitting on the, grocery store shelf for, a week. So absolutely, I would say utilize frozen foods, vegetables. I'm so lazy in the kitchen and I'm always looking for cheap options, stir fries, canned beans, canned lentils. There's so many options out there. So don't get overwhelmed by the trendy, things on social media where they tell you that's how you have to eat to be healthy, because it's absolutely not true. Non-nutritive sweeteners impacts on gut health. I can't believe I didn't bring this up, Holly. I'm so glad that you brought this up. So things like stevia, sucralose, these artificial sweeteners they're things that we find in just about everything nowadays, especially these health products. And the research that I've done in this area is extensive because I'm just kind of watching the trends, and they're putting stevia and monk fruit and artificial sweeteners and everything nowadays. And what happens is, thanks for joining, Whitney. What happens is that our gut doesn't really know our stomach doesn't know what these things are. We don't recognize them. So what happens is they make their way down into the gut microbiome. Remember, our intestines, our small and large intestine, and they become food for that bacteria in there. Now, is this good or is this bad? Well, long term, we don't know. We don't have research to show. But we also know, or I also know from personal experience and from working with clients, that if you suffer from digestive issues and you consume a lot of these non-nutritive sweeteners, you're more subject to things like gas, bloating. They can act as laxatives. I've seen clients who get really bad migraines when they eat them. And I was even talking to a client about this today. I would much rather you just eat sugar. Sugar is not the devil. Sugar is not going to make you unhealthy. I mean, nobody should be eating pounds of sugar a day, but I'd rather you eat sugar because your body knows what to do with it. It knows how to absorb it, how to digest it, versus having something that's artificial in the body, that, especially because people are doing it because they think it's healthier, when in reality, I don't think we really know that it's healthier, and it could actually be causing, harm to our gut microbiome. So I have never in my life cut out sugar. And I think it's, again, something, yes, sugar is not the devil. These are awesome questions, guys. Thank you so much. Any sort of deficiency, really. I mean, vitamin D, I see low levels of vitamin D in so many of my clients. It is just amazing. So chronic vitamin D deficiency, yeah, because then you've got thyroid issues. Your thyroid needs vitamin D to function. Your immune system needs vitamin D. Remembering that, yes, it's a vitamin, but it's also a hormone. Vitamin D acts as a hormone in the body. And when our hormones are out of balance, or if we can't produce them, then we're in big trouble. So you need to be on a supplement. Your doctor needs to get you up into a normal range, or I would say even above the normal range, because the normal range that we have, yes, everyone in New Hampshire, everyone in New England, honestly, is low in vitamin D. Yeah, a big thing is constipation, symptom of hypothyroid. Again, if you don't have those thyroid hormones, you're going to have sluggish bowels and you're going to see constipation. So always get your vitamin D levels checked by your PCP, because it's a very common deficiency and it's something that can be pretty easily resolved. Can gut dysbiosis be responsible for recurrent C. diff? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So for those who aren't familiar with Clostridium difficile, it is a chronic, basically bacteria in the gut that when it's overgrown can cause a lot of health issues. So having an imbalance of gut bacteria can absolutely be responsible for recurrence of that. Good question. Lingual vitamin D. I actually take lingual vitamin D myself, but you always want to, I just prefer doing it that way because you can absorb it under the tongue. Yeah, I'm going to wrap up. I'm going to move to the next slide, guys. So lingual vitamin D, any vitamin D, you always want to take it with a vitamin K supplement. So take this little snippet from me because it's really important. You can have high levels of calcium in the blood if you don't have D and K together. So make sure you're taking a K with your supplement. All right, so intuitive eating, this is like the big shebang here. It is so difficult to achieve intuitive eating if we have, a dysbiosis going on in the gut for so many reasons. Because if I haven't convinced you already, it controls our mood, our metabolism, our thyroid. It's related to all of these things, all of these aspects of our health. And we want to just, like, I have a lot of clients who come to me and they say, I don't know how to tell if I'm full, or I don't know how to tell if I'm hungry because, there's other things going on. And so I think we also need to take that into account when talking about intuitive eating, because it can be very discouraging when we have this sense of failure because we can't listen to our gut. And I remember I used to get so frustrated when people would say to me, go with your gut, or just listen to and Mom, if you're still on here, she would say this to me too. She'd say, just listen to, like, what does your gut say? And I would, in times when my gut was not doing well, I would say, I can't listen to my gut right now, because sometimes my gut was very unhealthful. And so that would be stressful for me. So anyways, it's difficult to achieve that intuitive eating side of things, which is, a big goal to get to, of, tuning into that intuition and what is your body asking for? What does your body need? Considering different layers like addiction or trauma, hormonal extremes. Maybe you're coming off a weight loss, an extreme weight loss, or an extreme weight gain, or you have thyroid imbalance, mindless eating, whether it's eating disorder, binging, purging, anything like that. So it's important to talk about all that. And speaking from personal experience, I've always worked towards that intuitive eating and tuning in, and it's very difficult when you're someone who struggles with anxiety and also has life that happens too, death of a parent, or stress of a job, or any sort of things that are also playing in there. And this is Melissa's expertise, so I definitely want to bring her in to kind of talk about it. But it's, intuitive eating can be difficult if you have some sort of dysbiosis going on. And then, so I talked a little bit with Maria yesterday about this, just the food feeling connection, and I, the awareness of the body and how your body's responding to certain things. Tune out diet culture at some point and say, what is my body asking me? What does my body need? What is my mood? Are you using food as a numbing behavior? Are you being hypervigilant about your symptoms as well? I work with a lot of patients who are just like me, where they've suffered from digestive issues from a very young age. And so now they're very in tune with, oh, this upsets me, or this doesn't upset me, or and that can also be, very negative as well, as if you become too fixated on some physical symptoms, like gas isn't always bad, bloating isn't always bad. Sometimes that's a normal process of digestion. So there's some deep intuition and spiritual work that can be done there, and definitely something that is important to work. And thank you so much for coming, for those of you who are leaving. And thank you, Mackenzie. I really appreciate that. Absolutely. This is so fun. So I don't know, like, this is my last slide, and then I'll go back to the other slide and pull Melissa in if she wants to tie in, and anybody else. So I do one-on-one nutrition counseling. Like Maria said, I specialize in digestive health. Also have a line of lab certified CBD oil products. If you're not interested in working together or aren't ready to invest in that, I have this great resource of Rewire Your Gut, which is on my website. I think there's about 58 recipes in there, and then some practical steps on tuning into your gut health, and some things that you can do to start to improve your gut health in addition to the ones that we've talked about today.
Erin, amazing. I was just wondering if you could share a little bit about what we talked about yesterday when you were sharing that insight you had about noticing that when you were done, like when you left sessions, your hunger would come back online. We were talking about honoring hungry. That might be a nice segue into Melissa weighing on intuitive eating.
Yeah, absolutely. So some of the work that I've been doing with Maria is really deeply rooted in some of my anxieties and stress, and really working on intuition with her. And so I was telling her yesterday, I noticed that after our sessions, I would notice like my hunger cues coming back after some of those sessions. And it was so like almost spot on the way that it happened. And I shared that with her and said, I want to bring that up tomorrow because I think it's really powerful how addressing underlying anxieties or just intuition and tapping into that, it really ties into your hunger cues, because if you haven't already picked up on it, it's all connected. All of this is intertwined and important, and there's so much value in all of this work.
Thank you so much, Erin. You are amazing.
Of course. Thanks for everybody that came and for all of your amazing questions. Those were incredible.
Amazing. So informative, so helpful. And I do want to, Melissa, are you, I can't see you on my screen, but I think you're still here. I'd like to give you a chance to come in and talk a bit about the intuitive eating piece.
Yeah.
Melissa, oh, good. There she is.
Still here.
Yeah. And so just a reminder, Melissa is a transformational health coach, and she specializes in intuitive eating, and she's also based in Boston. And she did the Bloominar last week, and we'll be doing it again next week. And go ahead and share whatever you feel like you want to share.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that a big part of intuitive eating is really learning to tap into what our bodies are telling us. And through the transformational coaching method, it's also unraveling like our beliefs around what we've picked up that we perceive as good or bad, or when we start to judge ourselves, and all of this ties into habit change. And at the same time, if you are experiencing like a nutritional deficiency, or you're not eating for your body's needs, then yeah, everything can become so intertwined and confusing, and we sometimes can't tap into our hunger cues or our fullness cues, or things like emotional eating, things like that. And so being able to work with someone like Erin and make sure that nutritionally you are fueling yourself is so important. Also, I have tried the CBD oil and it's awesome. So if you have a chance, definitely get some CBD
oil. Great. Thank you. Yeah, thank you all so much. I mean, Erin, do you want to say anything else before we completely finish? Or?
No, thank you so much for all your amazing questions and for showing up tonight. So I really appreciate it. And this was fun for me. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Good night. Thank you. Bye.